Hello and welcome to episode 232 of the Ideal Nutrition Podcast. My name is Aidan Muir and I'm here with my co-host Torwen Eerkens, and today we are going to be talking about sodium bicarb for athletes. So we're going to be starting by talking about what is sodium bicarb, and that's simple. It is literally baking soda, like literally the product that a lot of people have in their cupboards. Albeit you can have capsule forms of this if you would like. And as a little side note, which I think is going to be relevant for later, 1 gram of sodium bicarb has around 270 milligrams of sodium. If that is kind of meaningless for context, like we're typically aiming for, as an average person, like less than 2,000 or 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. So 1 gram sodium bicarb, 270 milligrams of sodium. Cool.
Let's talk about the proposed mechanism then specifically for athletes. So during long periods of intense exercise, your muscles produce hydrogen ions in excess, which leads to muscle acidosis and may contribute to fatigue. Extracellular bicarbonate, so dosing with sodium bicarb, can help to remove these H+ ions, maintaining the pH balance and supporting your body's ability to then match the higher rates of energy, delaying the onset of fatigue and potentially allowing athletes to sustain higher power output for those longer periods.
Super scientific there.
Dumb it down for us, Aidan.
I like to, and it's funny with this one because I know purists would be annoyed by this because of the technical definitions, because exactly what you said is like the technical definition is any exercise where you would quote unquote feel the lactic acid buildup. Theoretically, sodium bicarb should help with that. It buffers pH, and like that's a bit more of a technical way of saying it. But if I was going to narrow it down even more, any exercise where you're going all out intensity for between 30 seconds to approximately around 12 minutes. So this could be people who do like 400 meter running events or any endurance activity that's like less than 8 minutes or sometimes 12 minutes, right? I think this has huge relevance for sports like CrossFit, for example, based on that mechanism.
Yeah, and it's consistently shown that performance improvements of 2 to 3% in these events that last 30 seconds to 12 minutes, where you rely on that anaerobic glycolysis. So track athletes, cyclists, rowers, swimmers, combat sports, even team sport players who perform these like repeated sprints, this can have a positive effect.
Yeah, I think with team sports, one thing I would consider as well is in certain sports like ball sports, like basketball, soccer, whatever, I think it's rare for people to go like all out because there's still a skill component. So often people will leave a little bit in the tank, whereas like something like CrossFit, you're absolutely just sending it for the entire event, basically. In terms of dosage and how to take, so I'd typically be looking at it if we were trying to optimize it, 0.2 to 0.4 grams per kilo alongside carbs and fluids 2 to 3 hours before exercise. Once again, if that doesn't mean too much to you, I'd say for an 80 kilo athlete, this is around 24 grams. You can see a logistical challenge here with capsules though, because if the capsule had say 1 gram and often have a little bit less than that, that would be 24 capsules. So you can see why somebody might even just prefer to use like the baking soda approach, and they just could like mix it in with some water, drink that, tastes kind of gross or whatever, and then have some carbs alongside that as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of capsules, especially when you buy, I think Sodibic you can buy in a 100 capsule pack. You're using a quarter in one dose. So potentially baking soda works better. I definitely think taste is a big thing, as well as for a lot of athletes, like are you going to feel okay having that amount of sodium bicarb, tasting that, and then having to do exercise, which leads us sort of into the next point then of what are the risks of taking sodium bicarb and what can it do in the body? So gastrointestinal upset is a huge risk, and it's time and time again, it's been shown in research that this is a pretty big issue because it can cause nausea, stomach pain, diarrhea, and vomiting in some people as well. And most likely that happens around the 60 to 90 minutes post-ingestion, which for most people is when they're about to compete. So it's 100% something that we need to test in training and almost build up to as well.
Yeah, exactly right. It's definitely something that needs to be tested in training. And that is a very common side effect. So if we're now talking anecdotal stuff, there are a lot of positive athlete accounts where they very clearly notice a huge difference in that kind of lactic acid buildup type of feeling, and then probably a small improvement in their actual performance, like let's say that 1 to 3%, sometimes even more, sometimes people get more than that. But even amongst the people with positive experiences, there's still a lot of talk of their gut feeling terrible. And a lot of people have talked about it as a bit of a conundrum where it's like they have a 400 meter race in the finals of like their event, and they'll take it and they'll win, and they're like, but it felt risky. So
Borderline.
yeah. And I've got thoughts on that with the dosage being like, the dosage is quite high. I'm very curious, and I haven't seen many anecdotal reports of this about being like, what if you took half to 2/3 of the dosage? You still get some of the benefits just with less risk to the GI stuff, but I haven't seen many people talking about that.
A few things to navigate those GI issues then, if we can make some practical recommendations. So obviously, like we said, starting low and testing that in training, maybe building up to that 0.3 grams per kilo dose, taking it with sufficient fluid. So at least having around the 300, 500 mils of water with your dose to make sure that there's a bit of fluid in your stomach there too. Considering splitting the dose across the day, so 3 to 4 smaller servings. And then Aidan, I'm curious to hear your thoughts of how you would practically implement that with an athlete.
I haven't tried it with people that way. I've honestly just like done the full thing 2 to 3 hours before, but I can see the logic in splitting up. And I have seen people talk about it through the lens of also splitting it up multiple days leading up to the event as well, as rather than just that like big lump dose in like right before competing.
Cool. In terms of what the research has shown, like we said, the biggest benefits have definitely been seen in those short, intense bouts of repeated exercise when there's a lot less clear evidence for longer endurance events.
And so going through some studies, I was looking at some individual studies, and as I'm into running now, I'm on running Instagram algorithm a little bit. I'm following some like super scientific running coach type people, and one of them was putting up this post about how it's taking over running in that kind of middle distance and below type of space. And they were talking about this one study, and that I looked up afterwards as well, where they had 1,500 meter runners at a national level, so really, really high level, and the average improvement that they found was 4 to 5 seconds, which at a national level is pretty cool to take anything and get that kind of improvement. Like that's not a crazy, crazy improvement, but at a national level already compared to placebo, that's incredible. And they were making the point that it's taking over running partly for that reason, but then also anyone who's doing hard interval sessions, if they're obsessed with running, trying to be the best that they can be, you can make a bit of an argument that, hey, if you take this before your interval sessions, you'll then go a bit quicker during your intervals, create more of a stimulus that could then carry over to improve times on race day as well. Then if we're to then go deeper in the endurance research just in general, because I was very specific and individual there was a meta-analysis that found the improvements came out as exactly the number you said earlier, as a 1 to 3% improvement. I don't know if you got that from the meta. You did?
Yes,
yep. Yep. At an individual level, some people will get like a 5% improvement in times, and then others get less. And if we go back to that GI distress, often the people who are getting less, or sometimes it's made their times worse, it's due to that GI distress. Research also looks promising for long-term adaptations as well. So if somebody was having it before interval sessions every week, there's been research measuring people's, and this is in the show notes as well, but there's research like measuring people's lactate threshold. And they found that people's lactate threshold increased by more. So there was an 8-week study that found a 24% improvement in those who were taking sodium bicarbonate versus a 15% improvement in those doing the exact same training program without. The final thing I was going to talk about is just research on strength performance. And they found an increase in muscular endurance, but not strength during low reps, which is exactly what you would expect as well.
And I had exactly that as well. In terms of recovery, it really is an area of emerging research. And people say that it potentially does make a difference because you are able to buffer that acid down quicker, which potentially means that your muscles do recover faster as well. Again, it's something that we need to see a little bit more research in to make some solid recommendations.
So another little add-on I'm going to put in here, and I've been curious of this before. I actually never looked into this before prepping for this podcast, is how is this different to beta-alanine? Because both of them work through buffering pH. And I've tried both. I actually do take beta-alanine most of the year round, and I never feel anything. Like, I know the research is really solid on it. I think it's one of the most underrated supplements out there for certain activities and stuff like that. But I've never like felt a difference in like the lactic acid buildup. I have tried sodium bicarb, and it was a very noticeable difference that I felt. And looking at the differences, because from a performance perspective, actually beta-alanine is probably even more favorable for improvements in performance, but beta-alanine increases intracellular pH and sodium bicarb increases extracellular pH. Because the question I was wondering is like, do they like cancel each other out? Or not so much cancel each other out. Do they just like, is there no added benefit of having both? And because they're working through different mechanisms, if anything, the research is supporting added benefits for using both. And this has been studied as well in terms of outcomes. So it's cool to know that if you're taking one of these things, almost by definition, you should probably consider the other one as well. Although I would point out, Beta-alanine is probably a lot easier because you don't get the GI distress, although you do get the paresthesia and stuff like that, which is another thing worth considering too.
What about in practice then? We did have a chat off camera that it's actually not something that we often recommend to our clients. And for me personally, I think it would have to be a certain type of athlete that fits into this category that's looking for the 1 to 3% improvement in performance to recommend sodium bicarb. What about you, Aidan?
So I think anybody competing at a really high level in events that matching that description of that 30 seconds to 12 minutes all out type of effort should consider trying it, albeit approaching it with caution. So the reasons why I'd hold off outside of situations, like even if somebody's like competing in that type of event, but they're not like obsessed over trying to get as much as they can, I would hold off partly for the gut stuff because, as we said, like it's actually super common. Like that's a very frequently reported side effect. And then the other thing is the sodium content. So obviously it's in the name, sodium bicarb, but it wasn't until I tried it myself that I really thought about this, because I tried it myself. I weighed out like a 25 gram dosage or something like that. And then I was really thirsty. Like I drank so much water over the next couple of hours. And it's like that kind of thirst that you get when you like finish a meal at a restaurant where you've had heaps of carbs, heaps of sodium, and it's like you just really want to drink water. It was like that, but more. And then I sat down and did the maths, and I was like, how much sodium did I just consume? And I think it comes out as like, I had it written down somewhere. I don't see it. I think it comes out as like 8 grams of sodium or something crazy. And athletes are typically at much lower risk of cardiovascular disease. They're much less likely to have hypertension, and usually we don't care that much about sodium intake. In some cases, we're trying to get more sodium into people. I don't necessarily think it makes sense to go out of your way to have like 8 grams of sodium just in one thing, let alone the food you're having. Like most people would end up having more than 10 grams across the day. And if you did this pretty regularly, I think that's enough to be mildly concerned about, unless you're just trying to do the best you can in this sport and you fit that kind of criteria.
And that makes sense. And again, just cycling back to how we would recommend to take it then, pairing it with that carb snack, starting slower, just reiterating those things. Because, yeah, if you're having gastrointestinal issues, is that going to affect your performance more than taking this and improving it will? So that gives us a little summary of sodium bicarb for athletes. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, we would greatly appreciate it if you could leave us a positive review. Thank you.